It's 5:30 p.m. I'd like to call the regular meeting to order of the Fargo Board of Education for Tuesday, February 26th. I also want to check to see, we have a couple of board members that aren't able to attend in person due to illness and travel, but someone is on the phone. Is it Christy or Robin on the phone? Intending to join us, I believe. Well, let's go ahead and get started, and we'll try to keep an eye on that phone if we hear anything, and try to tune in to who is joining us. Could I please have a motion for approval of agenda? Jim?
I move adoption of the agenda with the addition of HR addendum under item 6C.
All right, there's been a motion for approval of the agenda with the addition of the HR addendum. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes,
Motion passes. And who is joining us on the phone?
it's Robin.
Robin, thank you very much. And Christy might be joining us as well in a little bit. Moving on to the guest report for the Fargo Dome Authority, Nancy Jordheim. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for some of you I know and some of you I don't. And Doug, I just met yesterday, and so this is grand. I think you've grown up from when I was the HR person, at least by height. He way towers over me. I want to thank you again for allowing me to be with you for the Fargo Dome Authority. For those of you that know and for those of you that don't, that I know now Bill seems to like to put this on TV. The Fargo School Board has the opportunity to nominate someone for the Fargo Dome Authority, and then the city actually is the one who selects that person. So I'm glad to do that. And this is just kind of an update of what's going on, and I'm open to questions, and if I can't answer them, I'll get the answers to you, so no problem. I'm not about to be embarrassed by that. So these are the things that Rob and I thought would be the things would be of most interest to you. Attendance at events and meetings, just over 544,000 people during this past year, so 18. We're talking about 18. They finished with an operating budget that was $473,000, which was $30,500 better than their budget. So they're making their budget, but not a lot, and some. The Fargo Dome has an economic impact, direct and indirect, that's measured basically by the city, about $39 million that it basically generates back for the city. Again, that would be 2018. In late August and September, the one thing that we have not done for a while is host Fargo football. And as you know, the turf was not done at South, so South was at the Fargo Dome 3 times. So that's kind of a fun little fact. It was fun actually to be on the board when they were saying, is it going to get done? Is it not going to get done? You know, we have the capacity and we know who these people are that are coming onto the field. Along with the North Dakota Activities Association and the Metro Tournament Committee, and Todd Olson is part of that whole group. He's the FPS director, athletic and activities director. The Fargo Dome hosted the state high school wrestling tournament, the state high school Class A girls and boys combined basketball tournament, and the state high school football. Okay, that would have been in 18. So those are the kinds of things they've been doing, and then they do Rumble on the Red. The big news part that doesn't really have anything to do with Fargo Public Schools per se, but has to do with the city of Fargo, is the potential expansion. And that really is, they're working with R.J. Engelbretson in town, and then they work with a group that does national kinds of things of renovation and restoration of places like the Fargo Dome. So they're talking about expanding the concourses, the east, south, and west, and kind of the whole discussion is, you know, how to use the parking lots well, how do you make sure that for each of the things you've got the right entry points, all of the things that you can imagine. And of course, as you know from schoolwork, are there enough restrooms? Right? That's a big problem. Are there enough conference and meeting spaces? And they're looking at nearly 40,000 square feet more in meeting spaces. And the process basically is that the Dome Authority now is listening to the things from the architect. And again, as well you know, that's more money than we really can spend, or we want to spend the money here before we spend the money there. All of the things that you all go through all of the time are the same things that the authority is going through now, including everything has to be fully handicapped accessible to today's date. This building is over 27 years old. So you can imagine that's going to be a fairly expensive situation, and as they're looking at the configurations of seats, that is one of the considerations. You have to have X number of handicap accessible seats for the number of seats that you have for an event. So, right, that's a special education kind of situation. It's interesting to see all of that come up again, and thanks to you, that is the easiest part for me, because I feel like I've been down that road. Not as a person that had to make the final decision, but as a person who now can understand it here. So I think you need to feel proud as community members of this piece and of your part in this piece and what they can give back to not just Fargo, but to the school districts in being available. Are there any questions that you might have that I could answer? Okay, if not, watch this. I am going to now change personas.
My name is Edith Ann, and I really want to know, when are you going to stop all this snow here? I have not been in school for a couple of days, and it's been very distressing to my mother.
Have a great day, guys.
Nancy and I Nancy had this request of me. Right? We talked about, could we add this item onto the agenda? And it's like, the agenda was already published, so we're not going to be able to take any action regarding snow tonight.
I don't know if it's in your purview.
It might be difficult, but we could always try and have fun, right? Thank you very much, Nancy, for also adding some light into our meeting. So, okay, moving on to staff reports, the FEA report from Laura.
I would like to bring some joy into the room. It might be snowing, but we've got a lot of sunlight back. So it's almost like summer, right? So with me tonight, I brought Matt Hallquist, who is, he's got two hats on tonight. He's on the executive board, and he is going to represent Ben Franklin. And he's got a couple things he wants to tell you about that.
I teach 8th grade English at Ben Franklin Middle School, and a few things happening in our building. We've got the Lion King Jr. performance this week. In 8th grade, some of the students already met one of their high school graduation requirements. They took their citizenship test January 8th and 90% passing rate, so that was great to see. And a new program has been rolled out now at the beginning of the year. Student ambassadors from every grade level in our building have been trained in introducing new students to Ben Franklin. Their role is to meet with the new students on their first day, give a tour of the building, make introductions, and sit with them during lunch for a couple of days. The hope is that by having the ambassadors in place, the new students will be given information that they really need to get along in the school day, feel comfortable, and make a new friend. And their future plans for the ambassador program include having them in our building on back to school nights, assisting new 6th graders in the hall with their lockers and directions during the first week, and being involved with the spring visits when 5th graders come to our building for registration.
Thank you. Anything else? All right. I did want to mention, we did not have anyone sign up to speak to us this evening, so I did jump over that part of the agenda and went right into reports. Our next report is Information Technology Report, and Bill Westrick is going to be presenting. Missy Eidsness, you are going to do an introduction?
You bet. We have Liz Thompson, Amy Soma, and Bill Westrick, who are part of our technology support for our district. And each year, they spend a great deal of time planning an event with the Metro schools called Metro Tech Camp. And so tonight, they're going to give us an overview of the Information Technology Report and put a little attention on one of our great events each summer, which is called Metro Tech Camp.
Thank you. Goal 3 of our lifelong learning strategic initiative is technology integration. I am happy to report that our elementary focused initiative in the district tech plan, the distribution of iPads to grades K through 2 is complete. So we now have an updated standard of technology across all grades K-12. As we gather feedback from teachers in our yearly surveys, one frequent comment is the desire to learn how to use the technology in new ways. But when is their time available to explore and try the new things? Well, our presentation this evening highlights one way we help provide that time. Presenting tonight are Liz Thompson, Amy Soma, and Kirby Angen, whose dedication and enthusiasm as part of the planning committee are key elements in the ever-growing success of what we call Metro Tech Camp, which is a 2-day hands-on learning opportunity. Starting things off for us is Liz Thompson, our help desk supervisor.
Hello, usually back room behind the camera, so this is a little nervous. So yes, I am Liz Thompson. I work in our IT department. Metro Tech Camp has its roots in a handful of classes that would be offered during the summer to just bring new technologies to teachers. And that handful of classes then in 2008 became Summer Tech Camp. And it was held at Carl Ben, complete with the colorful umbrella. Colorful umbrella. We had white Adirondack chairs at the registration table. It was a great, great time. At the end of the last day in 2008, I was exhausted. Jodelle Tyken, who is on the screen, was not. And we sat down and we're visiting about how wonderful Tech Camp was, the energy, the enthusiasm, the collaboration. It was just amazing. And she said to me in 2008, this could be bigger. We should do this across the city. We should get the districts together. And my head was kind of exploding inside. And I just said, oh. Fast forward to 2012 was our first Metro Tech Camp. We changed the name to reflect the districts working together. And we, with West Fargo and Moorhead and DGF, hosted the first Metro Tech Camp at Davies High School. And it was wonderful. We had outside speakers coming in. A variety of things were offered. The hosting of Tech Camp rotates every 3 years among the larger districts, and you can see there the locations. Just as a matter or note to compare, in 2008 at Carl Ben, we had 58 sessions, used 14 rooms with 90 attendees, and then you can look at what we did last year at Moorhead Horizon Middle School. And we shortened up the sessions we had morning and afternoon at Carl Ben, and now we get 5 sessions in a day. And the enthusiasm again and the energy that is at Tech Camp is really something to see. This is a picture of the group on the last day, last summer at Moorhead at Horizon Middle School. And those smiles are genuine. It's not relief because Tech Camp is over, but that is honestly the kind of joy, and the 3 districts are well represented there. So it is just joy to work with Metro Tech Camp.
So I'm Amy Soma, and I work in the Instructional Resources Office just next door. And I'm here to talk to you a little bit about how what happens at Metro Tech Camp then impacts student learning throughout the year. So to start out, I want to talk about the teacher side of it. Metro Tech Camp is our most highly attended voluntary PD in Fargo Public Schools. So in 2018, as you can see, last summer we had 195 teachers that registered for Metro Tech Camp, and 54 of those led at least one session during that time. Teachers that want to come for 15 hours worth of Metro Tech Camp can get grad credit if they so desire, but those who want to can just stop by for a session or 2 as well if they don't have time to commit to the whole 2 days. And I wanted to include the image of the lunch gathering at Metro Tech Camp just to give you a visual about the scale and the atmosphere. But that visual really isn't enough, so I also want to invite you to stop by this summer and really check it out. If you've never been there, never experienced it, stop by, peek in a room or two, and see what's going on. So, all those numbers really lead to the question, what would inspire all these people to voluntarily attend professional development during the first week of summer vacation? And the answer to that, at least in part, is it's a lot of fun. But it's also self-selected. So out of all those sessions that Liz just talked about, I'm sure any teacher can find a couple of sessions that pertain to them. It is creative, and it helps teachers explore their creativity, but most importantly, it helps model best practices for technology integration in the classroom. So I have these pictures up there, not to show you how much fun Metro Tech Camp is, but to kind of explain to you a little bit about what's happening in each picture and then how I've seen that translate into the classroom. So the first picture up there is virtual reality, teachers learning about virtual reality. And some of the ways that I've seen that take shape over the last couple of years are teachers using virtual reality to bring their students on low-cost field trips to provide context for their learning. So for example, I've seen teachers use a virtual field trip to Salem, Massachusetts when their students are reading The Crucible so that they can see the setting for the play. And I've seen students, this one was the one that really struck me, I've seen students who were studying and reading about nuclear holocaust go on a virtual field trip to Chernobyl. And while they were getting their goggles on, they were laughing and joking, and then the teacher launched the virtual field trip, and there were audible gasps, and then dead silence as the teacher began narrating. There's no other way we could bring our students to an area that's been devastated by nuclear disaster. So it really provided a lot of meaning to them to be able to really visualize what they were learning about. The second picture is teachers learning how to use cubelets. Now, cubelets are cubes, and each cube has a different function, and you hook them together to create a robot. So these are useful for teaching students sequencing, because if you put the cubes together in the wrong order, the robot will do something different than you intended or do nothing, depending on how you put them together. And it also can be used to teach a little bit about circuits and electricity, because every robot needs a power source, and if you don't put the power source in the correct spot, the robot will not function. Starting on the bottom, you see teachers practicing and learning how to do green screen videos. And this year, I've seen really green screening just explode across K-12. But at the elementary level, I've seen students making book trailers using green screen video. I've seen them giving reports that have their own writing superimposed in the background behind them as they're talking. I've seen giving book reports with the setting of their book or elements of the plot superimposed in the backgrounds. At the middle school, and this was just in the Journey a couple of weeks ago, there was a teacher and a tech coach that partnered to create weather forecasts using the green screen. And at all of our, or not all, but at a number of our secondary schools, we use green screen for doing daily video announcements as well. The middle picture is a little dark, but what you see there is a air block drone. And I can't tell you that we're using air block drones in the classroom, but it was really cool. But this was a part of actually a presentation by the North Dakota State Library, and what they had done is they have circulating STEM kits, and they brought a bunch of their circulating kits to Tech Camp. Teachers could play with them, became aware of them, and as a result of this presentation, we were able to develop procedures, because we didn't even know we could do this, develop procedures for our teachers and librarians to get these STEM kits from the state library. And I think we've ordered 6 or so of them so far this year, maybe more, 6 that I know of from the state library that are being used in our schools. So in a way, it's a good resource for us, because if it helps us see the technology before we invest in it, and if it's something that we really think we're only going to use once or twice a year, we don't have to invest in it. We can just borrow it for a few weeks. And then finally, this is the I'm going to get it wrong, Codapillar, that's what it is, the Codapillar by Fisher-Price. These are coding robots for our youngest learners. They have just simple directional arrows on them, forward, backward, left, and right, and you move the robot or the Codapillar from point A to point B by putting the correct sequence of steps in. Now, in Fargo Public Schools, we don't use the Codapillars, but we have a very similar tool called B-Bots that function almost identically to the Codapillars. So you can see there that, teachers having fun at Metro Tech Camp in the summer really translates to student learning during the school year.
We also try to make sessions available to those that can't be there all day long. Summer school is actually going on, so some of our teachers are teaching summer school in the morning. So what we do is we offer virtual sessions. This accommodates those teachers. They get grad credit the same as if they attended a session. They're equivalent to the 75-minute sessions that you would do in person. And last year we had 10 unique sessions. So I build the skeleton of that, and then we have teachers that put the content in, and then the participants can take care of those virtual sessions by a deadline time, by a certain date. I also wanted to mention that as a teacher of Tech Camp, what I really like is I teach and I can go to sessions and get the grad credit. So that's a real nice bonus too for those that are teaching.
And finally, we have an administrator track for the big school districts in the area. And as you can imagine, it is really, really difficult for principals to find time to get together, even in Fargo. This is a wonderful opportunity to give them a chance to talk across districts. What you see here is principal groups sitting together talking about the learning walks they did to each other's school districts last year. It also is being held at the site where Metro Tech Camp is, so when they're not doing their administrator track sessions, they have the opportunity to go and see what their teachers are doing and what they're interested in as well. That is it for our presentation, unless you have any questions.
Anyone have questions? Jennifer?
I'm curious, Bill, you mentioned that principals from other districts participate in the administrative walks or administrator walks. How many districts currently attend throughout? Is it statewide or is it local?
It is just the local, Fargo, West Fargo, and Moorhead.
That's great, thank you.
David?
You invited us to stop by. What are the dates for 2019 and the location?
June 5th and 6th, and that is at Horizon Middle School in Moorhead.
Thank you.
Have any board members attended in the past? Okay. Well, it would be great for us to receive a reminder of that event so that we can put it in our schedule for anyone that would be able to find time to either be there the entire time or part of the time. Thank you very much, unless anyone else has questions.
Thank you.
Yep, thanks so much. Okay, student data cards to drive instruction. Dr. Gross?
Thank
you'll
you very
introduce.
much. One of our strategic initiatives is student achievement and growth. And then in particular, goal number 4 talks about assessment and how we use assessment data to really get a good understanding of the students that we have the opportunity to serve, and how do we use that data to drive instruction in our classrooms. So tonight, Stephen Durow and Jen Sarr are here to talk to you about the work that has been done in teaching and learning around really getting the data into the hands of our teachers so that they can use it to make a difference in the lives of their students. So with that, I'm going to turn over to Stephen.
Hello. So back in about 2006, 2007, I can't remember the exact verbiage that we were using at the time, but it was basically data-driven dialogue. I don't know if it's still used that, but the point is it was a push to get some PD to get our teachers and staff, principals having data help make decisions. At the same time, the software vendors for assessments were getting better at taking their the results and putting them online. It was easier for us to access them, and it was also more robust reporting system. So with that in mind, there was an attempt made to bring the data from all these different sources and then actually make some decisions based on the data. So what happened is you'd have to log into NDSA, export the data out. Then you'd have to log into MAP, export the data out. Then you have to go into Ames Web, and then you had to go into reading inventory and the math inventory. All these different assessments, we had to export them out and then get them in front of the staff that was working with it in a way that made sense. Well, it didn't take long to get a lot of frustration as all our time was spent gathering the data instead of actually analyzing the data. So there was a question of, how can we make this better? So under the leadership of Dr. Gross, we put together a team with the idea of we wanted all the data to come to the individual instead of the individual having to go there. So it took us about 5 or 6 years to make that happen because we wanted to make sure we had a good solid foundation and at the same time have automated processes that were sustainable over time. So it took us that long, but I think we're in a good spot right now. Well, we were in about 5 years after that. So the first thing we had after that was the data summit, and Jen will speak to that. And then we said, okay, how else can we leverage this data now that we have it in one spot? And so the data summit was the first one. And then there are about several other applications that we've been able to do. One of them is the strategic plan dashboard. That happened because we were able to we had all the data in one spot. So tonight, we're just going to talk about one of those, and that's the data wall cards.
So first, we're going to start with the data summit, as Stephen had addressed. The opportunity that's presented to our teachers as they start out the beginning of the year, they typically get their class list, their class roster, and they know the students then who are entering into their classroom. And so one of the opportunities that we can provide by having all of the data in one location is being able to provide them snapshots of both the reading data and the math data for the students who are entering into their classrooms. And what this allows them to do then is to immediately begin planning for instruction. So who are the learners, what kind of learners are entering into their classroom, and then how can teachers plan for that small group and large group instruction. So it gives them a snapshot of the data that was collected on that student in the previous school year. And so as we think about all of the different locations that the data comes from, you can see that this is a snapshot of one of our 3 through 5 grades. And so starting from the left, we bring in information from Power School, such as what level of MTSS, if any, is a student currently receiving intervention for. And then as we continue moving across those columns, including if they've received reading recovery, if they've been identified as formal gifted services, receiving formal gifted services, as well as EL, special education, and 504. And what's really important to remember in these columns is that these are just indicators. So there is much more information to be gleaned, for instance, from the column indicated by 504. It only lets the teacher know that the column indicated as special education. It only indicates that the child has an IEP, but so the teacher is able to go into the cumulative folder and find a little bit more information about the kinds of goals and services that have been identified for that student. In the next section, the blue section, all of that information we export from Ames Web Plus. That's a daily routine that requires a human to export it every day. But within those couple of minutes of her doing that, all of our teachers have access to the most recent information that is available from that screener. Everything is color-coded, obviously green being the students who appear to be on target for success, the yellow partially proficient or at some risk, and the red perhaps being more at risk. And then as we move across, Fontes and Pinnell is our benchmark reading assessment scores over the years, as well as MAP assessment, and then in the far right column, NDSA. Something to notice in that blue section behind Ames Web and in perhaps some of the other cells that you see a number or a letter for Fontes and Pinnell that's in a bracket. And depending on how the student performs in the fall of the year or the previous spring, depending on how we're measuring that 1 year of growth, the number and the goal is what you see in the brackets. And so not only do we get to see where the student is currently performing, but we're also looking for where do we need to be in that 1 year's time to be able to demonstrate 1 year of growth. And that, of course, aligns to the strategic plan. So then within the Data Summit, each of our students' names is a hot link, which brings up then what we call a student data card. And you can see there are multiple tabs that are available on the student data card for each student. The second tab being the Data Summit. And when we select that tab, what we're able to see is then all of the data history that is available for that student for the as many years as they've been a student with the Fargo Public Schools. And again, each of those are then color-coded by their risk level and aligned with the year and the assessment. Hovering over any of those cells, then this cut scores table pops up, so a student or a teacher is able to see exactly where in that range do they fall. Are they in the proficient range solidly, or are they nearing the partially proficient range, and perhaps the student that we want to keep a closer eye on? So it allows a teacher and an MTSS team to be able to have more comprehensive conversations about their students. So as you can see, when a teacher looks at that entire table for the Data Summit, it provides a great deal of information. It can seem a little bit busy and colorful, but one of the aspects that we've heard from our teachers over the years is that without the color, it takes a lot more energy for the teacher to really identify where are the strengths and where are the challenges and areas of growth. And so we know that color is hugely impactful. And so as we work over the course of the year, as I mentioned, we are able to see students' results from the previous year, but then as we move into the new year, the table is blank. And as each assessment is given during that season, the table continues to build into what you see in terms of the end of the year. So once we had all this information available in the Data Summit in terms of a table format, what we were finding is that many of our teachers were beginning to say, we want to be able to have more data-driven discussions, as Stephen mentioned, and how can we use this data to really inform our instruction, plan for our small groups, and really be intentional about what the students need. And so that's really where the data wall cards were developed. We found out from many of our student performance strategists at our elementary buildings that they were creating things like you're seeing on the screen now that took that triangulated view of data, and they were selecting 3 pieces of data to say how is the student performing and in which areas do we need to be digging a little bit deeper, which became very time intensive. It was taking a lot of time for them to create visuals like this in order for their teams to be having those discussions. And so we came around that conversation to say, if we're already bringing the data into one location, how can we help automate that process to alleviate some of the time it was taking for those specialists? And thus was born the data wall cards. Very cleverly named because we were talking about data, and typically teachers were putting them on walls, really trying to sift them out into who was on target, who might need a little bit of support, and who maybe needs a little bit additional support. And so that's what you see the first round, taking a look at those 3 pieces of data. Buildings were able to identify which data points did they want to look at. And then based on each of those seasons, each row is a season, each column is an assessment. But based on each season, then we would get that overall color that appears in the upper left-hand corner underneath reading, for instance. And then what continued to come from there was buildings saying, you know what, we would like to look at these 3 pieces of data, while another building, based off their school improvement goal, perhaps wanted to look at 3 different pieces of data. And so we were able to customize the cards for each building. And so you see a few examples up on the screen, whether they were just looking at one content area of reading or of math, or they wanted to look at both at the same time, if they were looking at only 3 assessments, or other buildings who said, if we're giving the assessment, we want to look at all of it, and so all of the assessments are able to be brought to the screen. So it does allow for customization at the building level to really align with their school improvement goals and where they're collectively looking to go. And so with that, we'd like to just share, we have a couple of our student performance strategists from our buildings, our elementary buildings, and we'll start with Misty Miller, who will just share a little bit about her experience at Madison, and now she's a student performance strategist at Centennial.
All right, so Jen and Stephen kind of mentioned a little bit about the great tools that we have available at our elementary schools, and well, I'm elementary, so I know the elementary. And before we start looking at these great tools, we have to create some ways of thinking before we look at kind of setting the stage to look at this data. So or I should say, what I've done with some of our staff members is really look at shifts in thinking. So one thing we want to look at is we don't teach in isolation anymore. We're not in a classroom by ourselves. We don't think of those students as my students only. Instead, we're switching our thinking to collaborating. We, as a school, feel that those are all of our students. In grade levels, they share students sometimes, so we really have to kind of shift that thinking into they're everybody's kids when we're looking at this data. We also are teaching, which we still do, but we'll have to shift our thinking to learning. So as we're looking at this data, we have to realize that we have to learn some new ways to maybe teach certain things if our data shows us something. We have to be able to put our learning cap on and do some learning and do some digging. Another shift is going from that gut feeling of looking, before we look at data, saying, yeah, I think my students might be doing this, or, you know, my gut's telling me this, but instead we're switching our thinking to data-driven. So this great tool that we have and using that data-driven dialogue really shifts our thinking to say, no, the data does say this, and so that is how we need to, you know, make our decisions based on the data, not on something our gut tells us. Another shift in thinking is we're no longer blaming who did this, who did not do this, finding someone or something to fault when we look at data. Instead, we're becoming accountable. What happened here with our data? What can we do to make the results the way we want them? So by doing that, we need to keep our agreements. We need to perform what our jobs are. So those are another way to shift our thinking before we start looking at the data. And the last one that I always go through is really having that fixed mindset where, boy, these students can't read, but switching it to more of a growth mindset. They can't read yet, so we really got to dig in and find out what we need to do to get them to perform to what we need. And so this is kind of where I've always started with our teachers, is really making sure that our foundation is really a solid one, where we don't have to worry about those icky things that sometimes creep up, and so we really can start digging into the data. And Michelle's going to come up next, and she's going to share, now that we've laid this shifts in thinking, what can we do now with the data?
Hi, I'm Michelle Isaacson, and I have been at Claremont and Hawthorne my whole life, just about. 20-some years. It feels like my whole life. We have been using the data cards in a variety of ways. It depends upon the grade level. It depends upon what their purpose is at that time. So we look first at that analysis of the data. We'll maybe look for trends or maybe disparities in the class setting, in the classroom, or in the grade, or even across our whole school, looking at our school improvement goals. So we look at groups. We might look at a student and how they're performing over time, and who might need support, not just on the low end, but that support to push those high-end students as well. And sometimes those middle ones that just kind of hang in the middle, how can we move those as well? So looking for those groups, those trends, what's happening with the colors. The colors are, Jen had the data cards up here. He's like, oh, love those data cards, the colors, the colors. And it really gives you that visual without having to have the specific number. You know red, I gotta look, there's a lot of red on there. That's something I really need to hone in on. So we look at that for that growth and moving those students. What can we do? Like Missy said, that growth mindset. They're not there yet. They maybe made their goal, but how can we even push that further? So they might be where that goal is already, but let's go more. We also are looking at those data cards with making our instructional decisions. So we look at them as maybe a group goal or a school goal, but also as our instructional goal. What do we want to be happening in our math? what do we want, and our movement of our reading and with our students. So it might be setting a new goal for individuals, students. It might be setting and goals for teachers or grade levels. And we've even done, because we're at 2 campuses, 3rd through 5th, reading and learning is a little bit different than K2. So they tend to have, 3rd through 5th has a different purpose for reading than K2 does. So they have a little bit different goal when they're looking at their data cards. We will also look at those to determine interventions. Like we said, that red and sometimes the blue, these kids have been blue in this area over time since kindergarten, and we don't have them yet in gifted services. They maybe had a break from the Fargo Public Schools. There's no data in there. Let's look into this further. They also use them, some of our teams will lay the cards out and have them all spread out without names or without pictures, and just look at the whole set. What is this group without a person's picture, without their name on there? What is it telling me? Because then without that, we can't say the becauses. Oh, it's because so-and-so, or it's because this. It's what is right there in front of you. It's not the student, it's the data. And that helps us also with our small group instruction, and it can be flexible. So they'll bring those cards out every time a group needs to move. These students are not yet ready to move into a different group of working, and so we're gonna keep these ones, but these ones are ready to join them. So they'll shift those cards around, and even within a grade level. We have several grade levels that share students, and so those are not just their own students, it's the grade level students. And we also, at the end of the year, look at those to create our class lists, looking at them to be balanced. So we're not having one class in all the high students and one all the low students, so we make that balanced for everyone to have movement and growth.
Do you have any questions?
Jennifer.
Stephen, you mentioned that you worked on, or a group of you all worked on collecting the data over 5 or 6 years onto setting up this platform for teachers. And by the way, it's an impressive looking tool. I'm curious, when was it implemented? Is this the first year?
No, that was in 2006 or 7, so about 2012.
Okay, 2012. Very good, thank you.
Some of them we've had for quite a while, and others are pretty new. And it's exciting because now that we have, as you can tell, different people ask for, hey, now that we have this, can we try to do this? Our latest thing is what we're calling a handshake, which is the 5th graders to the 6th grade, we're kind of giving them some information of, because and then in middle school, the principals don't know the students coming in from 5th grade. And so this is an opportunity for the 5th grade teachers to have their students there with the data, and then they can have notes to say information about that child, and then they can be sent, and then the middle school principals can look at that. So the conversation there, plus also the grade 8 to 9. So.
Brian.
This is good, Dr. Gross and the staff. I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you have any data or statistics on how, the percentage of students that are improving and growing?
All of them.
I really think that that's where we rely on our strategic plan dashboard. You know, our goal as a district is for that year's growth, and so we have the opportunity to see what % of our students are making that year's growth every year and over the years. And then side by side with that is also then what % of our students are proficient. So for some of our kids, making that year's growth might mean that they're still not quite proficient, but we're also able then to monitor and watch how that proficiency percentage continues to increase. And so that's really where the information that you see from the data wall cards really transcends then to what does this look like over time, and as it relates to the strategic plan.
Yeah, and I would just emphasize again, this is excellent, so thank you.
Just one struggle, not struggle, but whenever an assessment changes, like for the NDSA, that has changed a couple times over the year. And so to get that trend data is sometimes hard to do. And when they change what we're looking at, can sometimes change those numbers. So we look like we're doing really well, and the next year we're not doing as well, but it's the different standards, or vice versa. We weren't doing as well, and then all of a sudden we change it. So it's that whole, make sure we're doing the same kind of data analysis throughout the whole trend.
Brian?
To follow up what you're saying, I think though it's important to, just because somebody else changes the standards, what matters is the teachers and the actual people and the students and the parents that are working with whatever standards and things that we're working on. So, you know.
Dr. Gross?
I think you saw a wonderful example of a homegrown product that we're able to create here in the Fargo Public Schools. In past meetings, I've shared with you that we're part of the North Dakota Innovation Academy. And at the last meeting just a few weeks ago, they asked for examples across the state of innovative ways that we're looking at data. I was going to share, but unfortunately I couldn't go, so the A team went in my place, and I've heard nothing but wonderful feedback from that, and multiple districts have already asked and inquired about more of how they could do something similar to what we're doing here in Fargo. So I'd just like to thank Stephen and Jen, our strategists, our principals, and our teachers to really help create this tool that in the end makes a difference in the lives of our students as we use data to drive instruction.
John?
I was also very impressed by this and the focus on the goals of breaking down silos, collaborating across responsibilities in the organization. When you get to be big like us, it's easy to get locked into your little tower and focus on your day-to-day job, and it's hard to break down those walls sometimes. So that's really nice to see. And the focus on moving from a blame mindset to an accountability mindset, and what have I promised to do, and am I going to meet that, and being able to work through that without pointing fingers is really impressive as well. And I also wanted to note that I thought it was, you guys did a really amazing job anonymizing and depersonalizing the information that you shared, and I caught that. That was really nicely done. Thank you.
Anyone else? I did have the opportunity a few years ago to attend. I kind of almost thought of it as a card playing opportunity. It was at Hawthorne, I believe, but it really helped me realize that we do take an individual approach to learning, and that it's not just a blanket one size fits all. It's very specific to be able to go in and analyze, what are those specific needs for those students. And I think it was at a time when the cards were maybe blank. I might be wrong about that, but I think that's a great way to be able to take that, like you said, some of what causes us to form certain opinions, one over another. So to just purely look at the data. But if anyone wonders or thinks that we don't have personalized learning, and really hone in on what the needs are of our students, that's not correct, because this is a perfect example to showcase that is what we do. So thank you very, very much for everything you do, and proud of the district for developing this and continuing. It's nice to see how it's been evolving over the years. Thank you very much. Okay, superintendent's report, Mr. Gandhi.
Sure. So today's report is just going to talk a little bit about the safety committee and then our upcoming building capacity and usage task force as well. We did resume our safety committee, although we presented recommendations to the board in December. That was with the original charge of the safety committee, which was to come up with a list of recommendations to look at some safety concerns that we are experiencing as a district. However, we thought that not just giving the recommendations to the board, we want to go a step further. So our goal now is to reconvene the safety committee and now start looking at what does the implementation of these recommendations look like? Are there some things that we as a district and administration are able to just tackle right off the bat? And if so, let's just go ahead and do those so we can start making immediate changes. But then also, are there some things that we need to put together larger proposals that might require significant investments? And if so, we just thought it'd be more meaningful to bring to the board those proposals versus just a general recommendation. The A-team just left, but one of the big pieces that they're working on is, as Stephen kind of alluded to, their job in information technology is evolving every single day because they're taking our systems and going even better. One of the recommendations from the safety committee was to look at our processes for tracking and reporting data around student behavior, not just for individual students, but even just campus-wide or district-wide. Where some hotspots, where do we see certain times of days where behaviors are escalated, and our technology department's now starting to work on a behavior dashboard that we're vetting through the safety committee to take a look at, and how can we use that data to inform decisions. So that's kind of where we are now. We had our first initial meeting for the implementation, but we are going to start working in working groups. So our next meeting's April 4th, and really the plan is to look at some of those recommendations that were presented to the board in December, create action plans of who, when, what will this look like at the implementation of these recommendations, and then post that on our district portal so all the employees have access to that, so they know where we are in terms of carrying out the work of our safety committee, and if there is a recommendation that needs to come to the board based off of that, we would, but we want to start tackling some of those things that we can right off the bat. The second update is really around our building capacity and usage task force. This task force begins next week on March 5th. We will be meeting in the conference room at Discovery Middle School. Today and tomorrow morning, we're doing notification of those that have expressed interest already in the task force. We do have some communities that have not that don't have a participant represented, so we're reaching out and working with the principals to make sure that we have equal representation from individuals or neighborhoods all across the district. For the task force, we're really excited about that work, and we look forward to that getting underway.
Questions? Brandy?
Have you had a lot of response with the task force, people volunteering for it?
Yes, I can't give you an exact number right now. We have had there's been some neighborhoods or communities where we said we want one parent from either each school or neighborhood association. We know that we've had a lot more parents sign up from the south side of town versus the other parts of town. So we may have had a lot of people express interest, but that doesn't necessarily mean that all those people are on the task force, because we're trying to balance that out across the board. So I don't have the exact number of how many people are selected on the task force right now.
Thank you.
Jennifer?
So I'm curious, along those lines, are there any updates you could provide us around other districts' conversations or continued conversations since, the end of that LRE task force until now? Are there any updates basically to provide?
I know that West Fargo Public Schools had the same discussion that we did. I don't know if there was a direction that has been shared with us at this point yet in regards to direction from their board in terms of how to move forward with the recommendations from that task force.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you very much. And on to the legislative update. You could take that as well.
Sure. So legislative update should be more quiet because we're just coming off of crossover. However, there are a couple of bills this week that we're monitoring that are directly aligned to our district's legislative priorities. I just wanted to mention those. First is tomorrow, I believe, or the 27th, there's a hearing on Senate Bill 2265, and that is the funding bill that has mentioned on-time funding as well. So that is definitely something that we have made a legislative priority for us as a district, and something that we would fully support. On March 1st, there is House Bill 1019, which is a CTE bill. That bill also has the potential to include funding for a career workforce academy. That is something that's been talked about in the Cass County area as we look at the workforce needs of our community. So that's a bill that we would support as well. And then lastly, very important also is mental health was one of our social emotional learning is how we labeled it as one of our biggest priorities legislatively this year. And there's a Senate Bill 2300 that allows for Medicaid match that would allow the districts to have some resources to support mental health and social emotional supports in our district. So those are really three big bills that we're monitoring and supporting and looking forward to see what happens. And then lastly, I shared with the board some information earlier on just House Bill 1469, which is the dyslexia bill, just around the district's position and some research around that. So that has been shared, and hopefully you had a chance to review that as well.
Does anyone have questions regarding legislative update for Mr. Gandhi? Thank you. Okay, on to the consent agenda. Is there a motion for approval of the items on the consent agenda, including the minutes of the regular board meeting from February 12th, summary of the work session we had also February 12th, human resources actions, board superintendent relationship, policy monitoring, and financial reports? Is there a motion for approval of the consent agenda? John?
President Knudsen, so moved.
And a second? All right, there's been a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying yes.
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 Opposed?
Yes.
Motion passes. On to the business portion of our agenda. We have one item, award of proposal, elementary office remodels, construction management, memo 76. Mr. Gandhi, would you like to take this?
I'm going to hand it over to Mrs. Gap because she is part of the interview process.
Thank you. Yes, we had a committee together and interviewed the three companies that are listed in this board memo. And that was Mr. Free, myself, and Jeremy Wolf, along with EAPC, who is the architects that we have chosen for these projects. And as you can see, we are recommending to go with Gertz Construction for the construction management piece of this, in part to the cost proposal, as you see, and would like your approval to proceed hiring the construction manager and proceed with the timeline for the remodels.
Jim?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion that we authorize administration to enter into a contractual agreement with construction management services with Gertz Construction Services for 5% of the construction costs for elementary office remodeling at Lincoln, Clara Barton, and Longfellow Elementary Schools.
Thank you, Jim. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. And is there any discussion? No discussion. Anne Marie, would you please call the roll?
Robin Nelson,
Yes.
Paulson,
Yes.
Rodenbaker,
Yes.
Ani,
Yes.
Benson,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Brian Nelson,
Yes.
Knutson.
Yes. Motion passes. Thank you. I do want to mention also, going back up into our consent agenda with the board superintendent relationship policy monitoring, there were a few comments or suggestions. So I will take that information for governance. So just that you know, if you made a comment or a suggestion, that we will discuss that at governance and decide if there's any suggested action. Okay, moving on to board reports. Robin, would you like to go ahead in case you need to cut out for a little while?
Sure.
Okay, thanks.
Yep, City PTA. The planning meeting was February 13th that I attended. The citywide meeting was February 20th. And at that meeting, it was announced that there will be some consolidation with city PTAs. Currently, right now, the only city PTAs in North Dakota are Fargo and Minot, and they are going to roll into the state. So there will be a little bit of a structure change there. More soon. Also need to have you guys save the date of May 15th for the spring luncheon for City PTA. There will be awards and what have you. Let's see, it's at the Fargo Country Club. Registration's at 11:30, and the luncheon and awards will begin at noon. As far as governmental affairs committee, let's see, social and the breakfast was probably the most well-attended we've had ever in my memory. So thank you for everybody that attended. I know that Anne Marie or perhaps Rebecca have thank you cards for those board members who did attend, that can send thank yous to legislators that did attend as well. So I will send out a list of those legislators that did attend, and then you're going to have to look up the addresses to send the thank yous. I think handwritten notes would be a nice touch. At our next GAC meeting, which is March 12th, we will debrief the social and the breakfast. And other than that, most of the weekly updates cover everything. So I just thank everybody who's been engaged. And we're doing some great things in Bismarck, and our legislators are listening to us. So thank you for your advocacy. And lastly, we need to thank Jolynn. She did a lot of coordinating and Jackie, for the social and the breakfast. So a lot of work there, but it was time well spent, and I think it was very well received by our legislators. That's all.
Thank you, Robin, and thanks for your leadership on that effort. I just wanted to double check regarding the thank you notes. You want each of us to send a note to the representatives that we currently communicate with. Is that correct?
Yep, within your local district. So I'll send something out with that momentarily.
Okay, so after the meeting, if you folks would like to grab a few thank you cards so that you're able to take care of that, I have them right here. That would be great. Thank you. John, please.
Thank you. I attended the Chamber's Economic Outlook Forum this past Wednesday. Thought that was interesting. The state's director of the Office of Management and Budget gave a talk about the revenue forecast, and what I thought was particularly interesting was the comparison he made of our revenue mix at the state level from 10 years ago before the real big oil boom to today, and how some policy decisions have made that a little bit more variable than it might have been in the past. So that was interesting. We had a negotiations committee meeting last week. We'll be meeting again this Friday, directly following the planning meeting. I think it's been announced at 8:15, but I think everybody on negotiations is also on planning, so just plan to do a doubleheader there. And that is my update. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Jennifer.
So Health Insurance Committee met today. They reviewed financial reports from 2018, talked a little bit about the initial utilization numbers around the Alex tool, since that's a new implementation. A few updates around Delta Dental, some questions that were answered from a previous meeting, but just to share with you briefly, from 2018, the financials were pretty much on budget. When you look at the Select Choice, as you know, we offer 2 plans in the district. Select Choice, that was a little over budget at 107%, but it balanced out because Blue Saver HSA plan came in at around 78%. In terms of number of employees participating in each plan, the Select Choice is around 960, and the HSA is 478. So that's it. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. David.
I attended the legislative crossover social and the breakfast, and I agree with Robin. It's the best attended I've had the privilege of going to. I also was with John at the negotiations committee meeting, and that's it.
Thank you, David. Jim.
Well, I was at a GAC meeting, I was at a crossover meeting, and this week we've got an SEEC board meeting tomorrow, and as John pointed out, planning is meeting at 7:30 on Friday, followed by negotiations, and then Saturday comes.
Brandy.
Me as well, the GAC meeting and the crossover, and then also on March 5th, we have a lunch meeting for the Fargo Youth Initiative to discuss the rest of our plans for Fargo Impact. So that's it.
Thank you, Brandy. Brian.
I was at a GAC meeting as well in the legislative breakfast and social, and it was fun to be able to talk to all the legislature about our goals and objectives, and I agree with David and Robin and everybody else that it was really good, and it was really fun to be a part of that. And that's it.
All right, thank you. I did distribute the president's report. Governance meets February 28th at 7:30 in the morning, so this week. I was also at the Chamber Economic Outlook Forum. Echo your comments, John, on that. Want to thank everyone that was able to be in Bismarck and for, paying attention to our issues that are important to us and that we're following as a district. And one thing I tried to do was visit with legislators, not only saying, what do we need from, not us saying, what do we as a school district need from you, but what do you need from us? So that we are trying to, continue to have a collaborative approach on working together and encouraging legislators to continue to open up conversations with us too, as we're going into this, as the bills move from one chamber to the other. So I'm just proud of the dialogue that we're able to have and the leadership that we have as a district, also with West Fargo, to just do what we can to move our issues forward. I had the opportunity, on a side note, to attend the state hockey tournament quite a bit this weekend. I just want to shout out, we had two teams that took second place this year, so the Davies boys and the North-South girls. So I'm sure they both would have been happy to have first place, right? But there's no shame in that second place win, and just proud of our Fargo School District for the effort that they showed, that the kids showed. And thank you very much for your reports. John, is there anything that we need to do for our next agenda item?
Yes, I would like us to, I'd move we enter executive session for the purpose of negotiation strategy, as permitted under North Dakota Century Code, Section 44-04-19.1.
All right, there's been a motion for entering executive session. Is there a second? Second. There's been a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying yes.
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 Opposed? All right, we will enter executive session. It is 6:36 PM. So board members are able to stay in the room and administrators. Robin, we'll catch you a little bit later for our work session. Is that correct?
Great. Just shoot me a text, ready for me to call in.
We'll do that. Thank you, Robin. call our regular meeting back into order. It is 6:44 PM. And is there anything else that we need to be discussing this evening? No? Okay, then our next meeting is March 12th at 7:30 PM, and we will adjourn 6:44 PM. Thank you.